Late August. The air is still warm, but something in it has changed. The nights feel heavier, sounds travel farther, and darkness seems to arrive too quickly. This is the season of goodbyes, the last camping trip, the final week before college, the last long walk before the clocks turn back. For most people, the end of summer is nostalgic. For a few, it is the edge of a cliff. In 3 different places, in 3 different years, people stepped into those fading summer evenings and never truly came back. A college town in Florida, a cramped council house in North London, a lonely hill above a Brazilian city. Each one swallowed by something no one could completely explain. As you listen, keep one question in mind. When the heat fades and the light dies just a little earlier, who, or what, is waiting on the other side? And are they already watching from the edge of the light? Late August 1990. Gainesville, Florida was swollen with students returning for the fall semester. Apartments near the University of Florida were crammed with boxes, cheap furniture, and nervous excitement. That weekend, 5 of those students would be hunted inside the places they thought were safest. Daniel Harold Rolling, later known as the Gainesville Ripper, had already killed before. In November 1989, he murdered a family in Shreveport, Louisiana. Now he was drifting through Florida, living in a campsite in the woods, watching students from a distance and choosing his targets. On August 24th, freshmen Sonia Larson and Christina Powell moved into an upstairs apartment just off campus. Reports described them as excited, busy with unpacking, eager for classes to start. Rolling watched their building from the trees, waiting for lights to go out. That night, he pried open their sliding glass door with a screwdriver and entered with a knife. According to court records, he bound them, raped one of them, and stabbed both repeatedly. When police eventually found their bodies, he had posed them, turning their death into a kind of performance. The next day, when Sonia's parents could not reach her, they called the apartment management. Maintenance workers arrived with police and found the front door blocked by Sonia's body. The officers who stepped inside would later speak about how silent that small room felt, as if the heat itself was listening. Before Gainesville could even process that crime scene, Rolling struck again. Over the next 2 days, he murdered Krista Hoyt, an 18-year-old records clerk, and roommates Tracy Poles and Manuel Tabawada. The attacks followed a pattern: forced entry, binding, sexual assault, stabbing, and post-mortem mutilation. In Krista's case, investigators found something that disturbed them more than the blood. Reports state that Rolling decapitated her and placed her head on a shelf facing her body, as if arranging an audience for his own cruelty. Even hardened detectives struggled to walk through that room. By August 27th, news of the murders had saturated Gainesville. Students dragged mattresses into living rooms and slept in groups with the lights on. Parents arrived in caravans to pull their children out of town. Gun shops sold out. Police patrols cruised slowly past every apartment complex, their radios hissing against the heavy night air. For months, the investigation lurched forward under blinding pressure. Tips flooded hotlines, and innocent men were briefly suspected and splashed across headlines. Rolling, meanwhile, had already been arrested in another county for an armed robbery. Only after DNA testing and ballistics work did detectives quietly connect him to the Gainesville murders. In 1994, he pleaded guilty to 5 counts of murder and was sentenced to death. He was executed by lethal injection in 2006. The physical case ended, but the psychological damage in Gainesville did not. Former students still talk about checking closets every night, about sleeping with shoes on in case they had to run, about the sick feeling that the thin walls of their apartments could not keep anything out. On the night of August 30th, 1977, in the London suburb of Enfield, single mother Peggy Hodgson was trying to put her children to bed. The rented council house was cramped, hot, and noisy with late summer traffic. Her daughters, Janet and Margaret, complained that their beds were shaking. Peggy at first assumed they were playing. But when she entered their room, she later told reporters, she watched a heavy chest of drawers slide across the floor on its own, stopping only when it hit the door. When she pushed it back, it lurched forward again. That was the moment she decided something was wrong enough to call the police. One of the responding officers, WPC Carolyn Heaps, would later give a signed statement. She reported watching a chair move about half an inch across the floor, without anyone touching it. She inspected it for wires or tricks, and found nothing. It was, she wrote, an occurrence that I have not been able to explain. Over the following weeks, disturbances escalated. Knocking sounds echoed from the walls. Toys flew through the air. According to Society for Psychical Research investigator Maurice Gross, he and fellow researcher Guy Lyon Playfair watched marbles and Lego bricks shoot across rooms at impossible speeds, yet land without rolling, as if they had been dropped by invisible hands. The focus soon narrowed on 11-year-old Janet. Observers described furniture shaking when she entered rooms, objects following her, and, most disturbingly, a harsh male voice that seemed to speak through her, answering questions with insults and fragments of personal history. Photographs taken by a Daily Mirror photographer appear to show Janet thrown from her bed, midair. Skeptics argue she is simply jumping. The case quickly became a media spectacle. Reports suggest that at times the children did fake activity, something even Playfair admitted. But he and others maintained that not everything could be dismissed. The police statement, the independent witnesses, the length of the case, all left a residue of doubt that ordinary mischief could not quite clean away. For the Hodgsons, it was less a puzzle and more a siege. According to interviews years later, Janet struggled with sleep, with trust, and with the feeling that people saw her as either a liar or a victim of something unclean. Margaret described their childhood home as like a prison. Even after the activity faded, the end of summer 1977 remained a boundary line in their lives, before the knocking and after. On August 20th, 1966, a boy looking for a kite on Vintém Hill, overlooking the city of Niterói in Brazil, came across something else instead. Lying in the grass were two men in neatly pressed suits, raincoats, and strange metal masks covering their eyes. They looked as if they had simply lain down and died. Police identified them as electronics technicians Manuel Pereira de Cruz and Miguel José Viano, both from the town of Campos dos Goitacazes. No signs of violence were found. Beside them lay an empty water bottle, 2 towels, and a small notebook. On one page, investigators found a cryptic instruction, 1630B at the specified place. 1830 ingest capsules, after effect protect metals await signal mask. The day before, according to surviving receipts and witness statements, the two men had traveled to Niterói to buy raincoats and a bottle of mineral water. The shopkeeper who sold them the water later told reporters they seemed anxious and checked their watch often. They said they did not need a bag, explaining that they would return the bottle later. An autopsy could not determine a clear cause of death. Because of delays and limitations in the forensic lab, the internal organs were reportedly too decomposed for effective toxicology tests. No obvious poison was detected, no burns, no internal trauma. The lead masks, crudely cut from sheet metal, offered protection from something, but not from whatever actually killed them. Friends told investigators that Manuel and Miguel were interested in spiritualism and had previously experimented with strange homemade devices, hoping to contact other realms or capture unusual energies. Some reports mention a belief that strong light or radiation might accompany such experiments, which could explain the masks. Local newspapers, however, quickly speculated about UFOs hovering over Vintém Hill, turning the men into cautionary figures in a story no one could verify. The investigation eventually went cold, and the official files leave their deaths listed as unexplained. Yet the image remains. Two men in suits, face up on the hillside, eyes covered as if waiting for a flash that never came. Residents still talk about that end of summer, about the sense that whatever appointment those technicians were keeping, it was with something beyond the reach of any police report. These 3 endings of summer are separated by continents and by explanations, or the lack of them. A killer whose name is known, a haunting no one can fully prove, and 2 dead men whose last appointment is still a question. What they share is the moment when ordinary evenings split open, and people discovered that night can hold far more than fading warmth.